Nuclear power. That's the focus of the latest deal between the U.S. and Australia. Nuclear-powered submarines, to be precise. Australia is set to get up to 5 from America, and sooner than expected. But China isn't happy. Officials there slamming the news as a Cold War mentality. President Biden, meanwhile, says the deal will boost stability in the Indo-Pacific, adding this is just the start of many more projects and cooperation. What do you think about the agreement? Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Australia has reached a new agreement to buy nuclear-powered submarines from the U.S. It's part of a security pact between the United States, Australia, and Britain. And China isn't pleased about it. Here are the details.
The leaders of the U.S., the UK, and Australia met in San Diego on Monday for talks on national security. The three countries formed a security pact known as AUKUS in 2021. Its goal is to counter the threat of the Chinese regime in the Indo-Pacific region.
Today, we're announcing the steps to carry out our first project under AUKUS, developing Australia's conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarine capacity.
Under the agreement, Australia is able to access U.S. nuclear-powered submarine technology. Nuclear submarines are stealthier and more capable than conventionally powered ones. Australia will buy up to 5 Virginia-class nuclear submarines from the U.S. They are worth around $3 billion each.
The AUKUS agreement we confirm here in San Diego represents the biggest single investment in Australia's defence capability in all of our history, strengthening Australia's national security and stability in our region.
The UK and Australia will also build new nuclear-powered submarines from a British design, with US technology and support. The first submarines are expected to be completed by the late 2030s. The submarines will carry conventional, non-nuclear weapons.
AUKUS has one overriding objective: to enhance the stability of the Indo-Pacific amid rapidly shifting global dynamics. In this first project is only beginning. More partnerships, more potential, more peace and security in the region lies ahead.
During the meeting, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also pledged to boost the domestic defence budget. He said the UK will, for the first time, move the baseline commitment from 2% of the GDP to 2.5% of the GDP. That means over $6 billion in the next 2 years. This is how Sunak assesses the threats that AUKUS faces.
But more broadly about China, I think it's just clear that it represents a systemic challenge to us and the world order. It's a country with fundamentally different values to ours, and its behaviour over the past few years has been concerning. More authoritarian at home, more assertive overseas.
The three leaders said in a joint statement that their countries have worked for decades to sustain peace, stability, and prosperity around the globe. And they say that Monday's deal will help them advance these goals.
The price tag on the submarines themselves is only the tip of the iceberg. The deal's funding goes far beyond that. It extends to building a submarine base and training skilled workers, including maintenance specialists. Total costs will soar as high as $250 billion over the next 3 decades. But the move still won bipartisan support in Australia. Opposition leader Peter Dutton said he would back the submarine deal come hell or high water. An expert compared the investment to paying an insurance premium.
Given the much more turbulent and disturbed and challenging geostrategic circumstances we face today, it's a hike in the insurance premium, if you like, for national security and the defence of Australia and its interests.
On the other hand, China said Tuesday that the U.S., UK, and Australia have gone further down a dangerous road. Taiwan is voicing confidence in its submarine program too, with support from the UK. Despite facing difficulties, Taiwan's defense ministers said that as of now, everything is going according to plan. For decades, Taiwan has been unable to buy conventional submarines from other countries. That's as those countries sought to avoid angering China. Despite that risk, the British government granted more than $200 million worth of export licenses to companies linked to submarine making. That number comes from the first 9 months of 2022 and is more than the previous 6 years combined. In response, Beijing urged the UK to refrain from providing military support to Taiwan authorities. Tensions between Beijing and Taipei are at their highest point in decades. China sees the democratically governed island as part of its territory and opposes Taiwan having any diplomatic relations with the West. The U.S. just laid out its biggest defense budget increase in years. That's to counter China. The Pentagon on Monday asking Congress for over $840 billion for 2024's defense budget. That's a 3% increase over 2023 and a whopping 13% increase over 2022. This follows on the heels of China's announcement that Beijing will increase its defense budget by 7.6% at $230 billion. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin saying Monday that the budget would allow the Pentagon to invest in capabilities that will ensure we maintain a ready, lethal, and combat-credible joint force with a laser focus on China, noting the pacing challenge posed by the Chinese regime, as well as addressing the acute threat posed by Russia. Washington's budget would boost areas like missile and air defense, including a push into hypersonics. U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks adding the expanded budget would aid U.S. deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. She said, "Our greatest measure of success is to make sure the PRC leadership wakes up every day, considers the risks of aggression, and concludes today's not the day." PRC stands for the People's Republic of China, the Chinese regime's official name. On top of that, it seems the U.S. is changing the way it views warfare. The Pentagon recently publishing a report noting U.S. adversaries intend to win without fighting. The U.S. has historically viewed war through the lens of peace or all-out conflict, while for many countries, war is viewed on a continuum. The statement notes China in particular has rapidly become more assertive. It is the only competitor capable of mounting a sustained challenge to a stable and open international system. It references a famous example, the 1999 book by two Chinese colonels called Unrestricted Warfare. It covers the idea of taking over another country without firing a single shot. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, writing in the statement's foreword, if the United States does not compete effectively against adversaries, it could lose without fighting. The Pentagon is set to test out this approach through a series of war games and experiments. Taiwan is showing off new models of its military drones, all of them produced on the island. Here's a closer look at what officials are saying about the technology.
Since the Russian-Ukrainian war started last February, drones have attracted more and more attention from the world and people.
Taiwan says its new domestically made drones are key to its asymmetric warfare capability. That means keeping its forces agile, so they're better able to face off against the Chinese military and its far greater numbers. In a rare display of its drone capabilities, the National Changshan Institute of Science and Technology highlighted its latest models. Among them, the Albatross 2 surveillance drone, plus combat drones that operate with GPS satellites. He urged Taiwan's troops to learn to use the technology, calling the drones quite advanced.
Bold use is one of the options available to us.
Beijing has ramped up military activity near the island in recent years. It claims the island as part of its territory, though the Chinese Communist Party has never ruled Taiwan and has threatened to take it over without renouncing the use of force. U.S. auto giant Ford now stuck in Washington's crosshairs. It's investing over $3 billion in a new electric vehicle battery plant in Marshall, Michigan. The Great Lakes state is ready to pump over $600 million into the project, but the deal is coming under bipartisan scrutiny over its China ties. It's also facing local pushback. Here are the details.
New pushback on Ford's planned electric vehicle battery plant. Some state lawmakers are pushing against Michigan's over $600 million funding for the plant, approved in early March.
I don't even think it benefits your community. What this benefits is Ford, it benefits the partnership with China, with the Chinese Communist Party.
While supporters hailed the spending bill's passing,
it's the best economic news to South Central Michigan in my lifetime.
Ford is investing over $3 billion into the plant, and it's set to create over 2,500 jobs. So why the controversy here? Ford would source battery technology, equipment, and some workers from a Chinese company. This Chinese company called CATL makes 3 out of every 10 EV batteries in the world. It also supplies batteries to companies like Tesla and BMW. The Ford plant would mark CATL's entry into the U.S. market. In spite of its ties to the Chinese company, Ford's new plant is projected to get over $1 billion in tax credit under the Inflation Reduction Act. That's because a Ford subsidiary, an American company, would own the factory. But the deal is sparking bipartisan concerns. Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin dropped his state's bid for the factory, calling the project a Trojan horse for the Chinese Communist Party. Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat, also expressed concerns. A spokesperson told Politico that Manchin had been clear about his worries tied to vehicle supply chain reliance on China, adding that Ford has serious questions to answer before Senator Manchin can fully evaluate the business partnership. Right now, China controls 80% of the market share of lithium-ion batteries used in electric cars. NTD reached out to Ford for comment, but did not receive a reply before airtime.
On Capitol Hill, Senator Marco Rubio is cornering Ford's deal. He's introducing a new bill, and if passed, Ford wouldn't be able to get U.S. tax credit for its new Michigan plant. The automaker is projected to get over $1 billion in tax credit for the project under the Inflation Reduction Act. Republicans on the House Energy and Commerce Committee are seeking a retraction from Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm and demanding that she testify immediately. Those requests after she praised the regime in China for its efforts to combat climate issues. She made the controversial comment during an interview last Friday for the 2023 South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas. Here's what she said. We can all learn from what China is doing to lessen its carbon footprint. What's more, she commended Beijing for being very sensitive on the climate issue and called its investments in clean energy encouraging. In a letter to her, GOP lawmakers said they were deeply troubled by her alarming remarks. They added that her words raised serious questions about her judgment and priorities as energy secretary. The letter went on to say her comments, quote, at best, reflect an uninformed, unserious perspective on the goals and intentions of the Chinese Communist Party and its abysmal human rights and environmental record. The lawmakers pointed out that China poses one of the greatest threats to the U.S. while continuing to be one of the world's worst polluters. The Energy Department did not respond to a request for comment by airtime. Japan is set to dump treated water from its Fukushima nuclear plant into the Pacific Ocean. A Chinese media outlet was quick to take a swipe at the plan, but that attempt quickly stalled after information came out that Chinese nuclear power plants release water even more polluted than the Japanese plant proposed. Here's more.
China is taking aim at nuclear waste discharge tied to Japan's Fukushima power plant. 12 years ago, a massive earthquake and tsunami triggered a nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Water used to cool the damaged reactor is piling up in large quantities. Its operator, TEPCO, planned to release the over 1 million tons of filtered wastewater into the sea, starting this year. Earlier this month, a Chinese newspaper denounced the move as irresponsible. Citing a written interview with the Embassy of Japan in China, the report states the embassy failed to clarify the impact of wastewater on fishing communities in neighboring countries. But Tokyo says the article is spinning the truth. The Embassy of Japan posted the full interview on its Twitter account, saying it had specified the released water would be safe for both humans and the environment. Officials stressed a treatment method known as the Advanced Liquid Processing System, or ALPS. This system dilutes the level of tritium, a low-risk radioactive nuclear substance in the wastewater. After processing, its concentration reaches 1/40th of the level allowed for Japan's drinking water. In a further illustration, the embassy said this amount is far lower than China's tritium emissions in 2020. Of the 4 nuclear power plants along China's eastern coast, one released over 4 times more tritium than Fukushima, while the plant with the highest emissions totaled 7 times higher.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Weather devices or tools for espionage. From a spy balloon to buoys, we zoom in on Chinese objects appearing around the United States.
Nothing's benign with the Chinese Communist Party. So, I mean, obviously, that data won't just support, commercial interests down the road for a Belt and Road lane, which they told us in 2017.
We hear from retired U.S. Navy captain and former director of intelligence for the U.S. Pacific Fleet, James Fennell. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Epoch TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.